Now, we've already talked about who you are as a person and how that fits in. Who are you? What's important to you? Your heart, your mind, your body, and your soul, right? What's your personality trait? What's your ethic, right? We blend that all in. And we also talked a little bit about, are you dominant? Are you intellectual? Are you sensitive? And are you competent? The next thing I want to show you is something that I do at the Pentagon. It's called HPO, High Performance Organization Training. And it's based on what I like to call an adulteration of a lecture called the DISC. So I've seen some things online. I've heard some things from my business coach. I've picked some things up along the way. And I've sort of made this lecture on my own, sort of a spin off of other things that I've learned. So what I want you to do once again is I want you to consider a square here. And there are people who are dominant, there are people who are intellectual, there are people who are sensitive, and there are people who are competent. So when we talk to a dominant person, a lot of people really don't have a patience for a dominant person because they get so aggravated. They have a story to tell, they want to talk to their boss, but their boss sort of comes in and they cut them to the quick, And what I want to try to do in this disc is talk about personality traits, who people are, and how you can talk to them. Okay, how you can communicate at a much higher level. If you know who you're talking to and a personality trait, you can communicate. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at a dominant person. Well, what kind of traits does a dominant person have? How do you tell who they are? Well, the position of authority sometimes is a dead giveaway. If they're a foreman or a project manager or a president CEO type, they're probably going to be somebody who is pretty quick to get to the point. A T-crosser, an I-dotter. Probably one of the best ways to talk to these people is use bullets. And a little secret that I always tell people is if you really want to get through to the person, ruin the movie. Tell them exactly what you want. The first sentence out of your mouth, ruin the movie. Good communication is good safety. In mind safety training, they have something called SLAM, stop, look, analyze, and manage, right? Well, part of management is being able to communicate clearly to people what needs to be done next. Communication is key. We're going to define that later, but I just want you to know where this is going. So the DISC, dominant, intellectual, sensitive, and competent. As we take a look at dominant people, we remember the bullets. We remember start at the bottom, and we want to ruin the movie. So what you want to do, for example, if it was, well, you tell me what movie this is. See if you can guess it while I'm talking. You run up to the boss. Boss, the water was cold. The boat sank. It wasn't supposed to. They didn't engineer it that way. Did you get it yet? There was icebergs. Did you get it yet? They were going really fast. Did you get it yet? No, it's the Titanic, right? That's the movie. I didn't tell you about the love story on the bow. I didn't tell you about a bunch of stuff that didn't pertain. I went straight to the facts, and you were able to figure it out, okay? The smart thing would be, boss, I'm going to tell you about the movie Titanic. It sank when it wasn't supposed to. Right? That's your first sentence, and then you go as far as you can until they interrupt you. And when they interrupt you, let them. But make sure you have an agenda with bullets that you guide that dominant person across those bullets so you talk about everything specifically and quickly and get the conversation to a conclusion as quick as possible. The next person that you might have to talk to is somebody who is intellectual. And so what I oftentimes do is I tell people, picture somebody that's an engineer or an accountant, an office coordinator. These people are going to be people that need to have something in front of them, a piece of paper, the policy, the written program, the standard operational procedure, what type of training requirements are somebody going to have, their responsibilities, their accountabilities, who's going to audit them. They need to know these types of things. I like to use an example here with intellectual people that, you've got to be careful what's in writing. Make sure you know who the author is. Facts are not facts just because they're on paper, right? So we have to make sure with T's crossed and I's dotted that we're talking about factual things and not things that were written about that are strongly believed in. There are a lot of things right now that people strongly agree with. They're fact, and there's things that are people strongly disagree with, and they say, no, they're not fact. And we've really got to take a look at the studies, and we've got to take a look at where we can put our convictions in order to support those. When you talk to somebody who you know is intellectual, make sure you're dealing with factual material. One of the best ways I can tell you that I could describe this is if you take a look at somebody who wrote Boyle's Law, which was Boyle, right? That's the gas law, the ideal gas law. We learned from different lectures online that, it wasn't really even Boyle that come up with Boyle's Law. It was actually Henry Powers. I did not know that until I watched the lecture the other day online that basically highlighted that fact. I found that very interesting. But one thing that Boyle was known for was he wanted to make sure that things had some level of error. Plus or minus 3% is a good number to think about when you're thinking about the rate of error, right? You want something to be very factual. If you had a doctor that was going to work on one of your organs, you would want him to be plus or minus 1 or 2%, right? 3% maybe, but not plus or minus 70%. If something is plus or minus 70% correct, you're most certainly not going to want to follow that advice, are you? Especially if it's your body organ that's going to be worked on. I think you want a second opinion, right? So when you provide information to an intellectual person, try to find factual materials that you're basing what you're telling them on. And once again, draw that to a very tight conclusion, intro body conclusion, so they can get something out of it, extrude some information, and move on. The next person is somebody who's sensitive. And I'm just going to draw a sensitive person here, okay? And this person who is sensitive, there's something my cousin had told me about communicating with people, which I thought was pretty powerful. He said, Frank, your ears are for hearing. Okay, well, try not to be insulted by that, but okay. So your ears are for hearing. That makes a lot of sense to me, right? But it doesn't make any sense in this lecture. I don't understand. And then he said, your eyes are for listening. And it reminds me of something my grandma used to tell me. She would say, hey, your eyes are the windows to the soul. Your eyes are the windows to the soul. So if you stop what you're doing, think about that. How many times have you tried to talk to somebody and they're on a text and they're texting somebody? Well, if they're texting people, they're not listening to you. And you don't feel like you're being listened to. And that causes a little bit of aggravation. And so you might raise your voice or try to get their attention, and it becomes even more frustrating. And the more frustrated you are with a person, the less we can talk about facts, and the more it becomes about mannerisms and other isms, okay? So the idea is that if you you hear with your ears, but if you listen with your eyes, stop what you're doing, stop texting, stop using the computer, and give them your eye contact. Now, the only time that wouldn't work is if you're driving. That's unsafe, and I wouldn't do that. But nonetheless, the idea is you hear with your ears, you listen with your eyes. Eye-to-eye contact is very powerful, and I believe if you look at Men's Health, you will find out there's an article in there that talks about eye contact, and it's a very powerful representation of how people learn to understand each other, and they talk about the number of seconds that you could look into somebody's eyes. And if I remember the article correctly, it says that if you look at somebody for longer than 6 seconds in the eye, you're having a personal moment. Perhaps you want to have a personal moment, and this is when you want to get sensitive. Look them in the eye when you talk, right? Finally, there's a competent person, and this would be somebody who is a bolt turner. Okay, they know how it works. They can take it all apart and put it back together, and it works every time. They are maintenance people. They are building facilitators where they can make anything. They know what switches to flick, air conditioning, HVAC, systems, ventilation systems all throughout the entire facility. What they do, how they do. These people are people that you want to be very careful that you show them the utmost respect for their vocation. I'll give you an example if I can. Say that you come up across a diesel mechanic. Now, for those of you who don't know, diesel engines do not have spark plugs. So if you start trying to talk about the spark plugs and how hard they are to find on a diesel engine in order to change them, and you look at the guy and say, can you tell me a little more about that? He might look at you a little crooked and start laughing like, yeah, you know what you're talking about, right? You don't know. If you don't know what you're talking about, I suggest very quickly telling a competent person, hey, I have no idea which side is up on this thing. I don't even know where to start. Can you tell me a little bit about how I can make this better? I've read some things, but I would really like you to explain it to me because I don't know if I can get there from here. And they would love to tell you about what they do, how they do, for why they do, from their point of view. But if you don't respect where they're coming from, the maintenance people, the mechanics, sometimes they get a little more difficult to talk to. So you're going to have to, sort of hand it over to them. They're hands-on people. They're used to feeling it, touching it, looking at it. They might not even read the directions very well because they've done it so many times. They know the nature of the beast. They know the nature of the equipment. They don't even need the directions 9 times out of 10, okay, to get started. They should read the directions, but I'm just saying. So dominant people, communicate to them by ruining the movie and going up through bulleted items that you know that you want to have covered to communicate clearly. Intellectual people, you want to make sure that you have documentation that's plus or minus 3% in order for them to understand what's going on. Sensitive people, you want to look them in the eye, take a deep breath, tell them how you feel, listen to how they feel, okay, with your eyes. And then finally, with a competent person, show them respect for their vocation. If you follow these simple rules in what I call the DISC, my DISC, for being able to communicate to people, you're going to elevate where you are with people in their mind. They're going to respect you a lot more. You're going to respect them a lot more. And believe me, when we talk about emergency response and safety issues, we want to have mutual respect. It's very important to have that as a core element within a safety training